Thanks very much. I hope you can all hear me well. Thank you very much indeed for this very generous invitation to be able to present to you the detail of knowledge translation for Cochrane, some of the work that we're doing, what it is in terms of our global organisation, how the framework is being implemented across a variety of themes. I'd like to share with you today some case studies and examples, how we're implementing and embedding knowledge translation as part of our daily activities within Cochrane, and some of our future activities and key priorities for the next 12 months or so. I think the presentation is being for the next 50 minutes or so, and then I'm going back to discussion and welcome your comments and feedback on this presentation. So thank you very much. If I could just begin by saying that I have been extremely warmly welcomed, not just as part of Cochrane South Africa, but in terms of the global organisation of Cochrane, and how many people and advisors we've been working with in terms of knowledge translation to support the organisational implementation of knowledge translation. It's a relatively new area for Cochrane. A knowledge translation framework was approved in 2017 by the governing board, and we are now into our second year of implementation. I am part of a senior management team, part of Cochrane, and my remit, as Solange has alluded to at the beginning, is to lead the coordination, facilitation and support to implementation of knowledge translation in Cochrane. And that's a truly collaborative effort. I have a team of 8 people, but we work with working groups, we work with volunteers, and our remit is really very wide-ranging. Our remit is very wide-ranging, so I'm responsible for a range of functional areas, and these include leading the implementation of knowledge translation in Cochrane, but also internal and external communications, dissemination, events, brand and marketing, our multilingual activities, and the work of Cochrane Fields, who are a specific set of 11 groups who have a remit to build and develop global collaboration and networking and communities of practice in the work of knowledge translation. So the content of my presentation will look at how we define knowledge translation in Cochrane, the 6 themes of the framework, our work to date using case studies and examples, some of the key progress, our future activities, and a summary of questions. Solange has shared with you a little bit of my bio and my background. Suffice to know that I am not an academic, I'm not a scientist, I'm also not a healthcare professional. My background is in working in the media, in communications. I have more than 20 years experience in print and broadcast journalism. I have had a number of senior leadership positions within the broadcasting sector. That includes BBC, commercial radio, TV, ABC in Australia, and also digital content production. And my biggest passion, which brought me to Cochrane and also to the field of knowledge translation, is to really put audiences at the heart of everything we do. And whether that's audiences that consume information, news, information and entertainment, or whether in this case, health journalism brought me to Cochrane, and putting the end user at the heart of all we do is a passion of mine, and what motivates and drives me every day. And I was once told a long time ago by a news editor to listen to your audience, listen to them some more, and when you are sick of listening to them, go back and listen to them again. And I've tried to apply all that experience, all that wealth of working with communicators and professional journalists in my world, to apply that to knowledge translation in Cochrane. So really listening to the end user of what really will make a difference in terms of driving health evidence into practice and policy. So it's taken a while to implement knowledge translation into Cochrane. We began with a framework, and we know that in terms of knowledge translation, there are many overarching definitions of it. Some people call it knowledge transfer. Some organizations refer it to as knowledge translation. And for Cochrane, this is about increasing the use of our health evidence to show the impact of our research and hence the value of our research. So together with a group of advisors, we have determined the definition of knowledge translation in Cochrane, which we abbreviate as being KT, as the process of supporting the use of health evidence from our high quality, trusted, systematic reviews by those who need it to make health decisions. As an organisation, we have a well-defined vision and a mission as part of our strategy to 2020. That's our organisational strategy. And our vision is linked to our KT framework, which is a world of improved health, where decisions about health and healthcare are informed by this high-quality, synthesised research evidence that is both relevant and up-to-date to the needs of end users. We also have a mission which drives our purpose, which is to promote evidence-informed health decision-making by producing high-quality, relevant, accessible, systematic reviews and other synthesised research evidence. This is linked to our strategy, as I've said. We are now going into the last year of our strategy, and as a senior management team, together with our governing board, we are also working on developing the new organisational post-2020. But essentially our strategy and the framework for that strategy is centred around 4 key goals. One of producing evidence, one of making that evidence accessible, advocating for the use of that evidence, and building an effective and sustainable organisation. So essentially what we're doing is we are producing, making it accessible, advocating for it, and then goal 4 really underpins everything that we're trying to achieve with the top 3 goals. Knowledge translation really is a thread that works through all 4 goals as we are understanding. Our work today has really been centred around goal 2 and goal 3. However, we also appreciate that in order to really understand the requirements and needs of our end users, knowledge translation really has to be at the beginning of the process, all the way through, as well as the end process. So we are looking more now at how knowledge translation is embedded and integrated from the very beginning of our editorial processes. So knowledge translation in Cochrane really does capture a whole range of activities. It's ensuring that our evidence is relevant, that we are prioritising the right reviews as part of that goal 1 in producing evidence, and we are delivering them in the timely way. So are we asking the right questions? Are they the right prioritised health topics? Are we delivering them in a timely way that meets end user needs? We want to be sure that our evidence is accessible, goal 2, and they're produced in a format and in languages that can be understood, used, and are consistent for translatability. And we work in partnership with audiences to facilitate the use of that evidence. And that's happening more and more across Cochrane. We have, as part of our framework, identified the 4 main audiences policymakers, practitioners, patients, the public, researchers and research funders. And we are driving our work, we are developing our work in partnership with these audiences to support the use of synthesized evidence. So knowledge translation is not at the end of the process and is not something new. This is something that we are really trying to make sure has been integrated across all of our practices and our editorial processes. This diagram here shows the process. So it's not just at the end of the review production cycle, but also how it should be integrated throughout the review cycle. And you can see how the evidence lifestyle begins at number 1 and goes right through to the evaluation at 14, but really how the knowledge translation process lives and breathes alongside that production process. So if we look now at the framework, this is the knowledge translation framework. In other words, it's a strategy. It's what we set out to do and how we absolutely take these 6 themes and make them fit, integrate them into Cochrane's day-to-day work. The 6 themes are around prioritization and co-production, packaging and push, in other words, formatting and dissemination, facilitating pull, which is growing our users' capacity to find and use our reviews, exchange, which is engaging with end users to support their evidence-informed decision-making, improving the climate, the fertile ground in which KT can grow and develop, which is really an advocacy piece aimed at advocating for evidence-informed health decision-making, and building sustainable KT processes. So building a future-proof, sustainable infrastructure for knowledge translation across the organisation. These 6 themes define our work, and there are large swathes of the organisation led by our team that are working in all these 6 areas. So the framework aims to build on the existing work in Cochrane. As I said at the beginning, this is not something new. There have been pockets of knowledge translation done exceptionally well across our organisation. But what this framework and our subsequent implementation gives us is the opportunity to embed it and coordinate it in a more systematic way, and to really work hands-on with end users to help support this work. It provides us with a formal structure for thinking and approaching KT, and coordinates work from across the community to support Cochrane being a KT-centred organisation. I'd like to look at the themes in a little bit more detail. So what do we really mean by prioritising and co-production? Well, essentially, this is about producing reviews which meet the needs of our end users. And a number of our review groups, those are the groups that are responsible for producing our systematic reviews, have led and are lead and continue to lead and have plans for priority setting. Producing reviews that meets the needs of our end users is our ultimate aim here. So here are a couple of examples. Our Tobacco and Addiction Review Group leads to funding calls for primary research. Cochrane Consumers and Communication identify 5 priority reviews, which they will co-produce with consumers. And Cochrane Fertility Regulation have completed a prioritisation of topics on female contraception using pragmatic exercises. These are just 3 examples, but all our 53 review groups across the organisation now have strategic plans that really link them to priority setting exercises. So we really are addressing and answering the questions that end users require. We have a working group that supports and facilitates the work of this priority setting. and they work very closely with the Cochrane review groups and other key stakeholders. And part of the first year of implementation was to produce a guidance note for all Cochrane review groups on how to define their priorities. This was developed by a working group made up of senior editors, editorial teams, peer reviewers, managing editors, coordinating editors, and authors. And this is available for all our Cochrane groups to use, and it supports the process with working examples, additional learning support, and resources. Theme 2 looks at packaging and push. So ensuring that our users receive and can act on our reviews and our products. So this is a big thing for me and for my team. We have spent a lot of time in the last 12 months or so really understanding how end users receive and consume information, and that is very different depending on who you are, whether you're a patient, whether you're a policymaker. How do you consume the information? What's the best way of you receiving information and findings about a Cochrane review that's tailored to your needs? And we are identifying appropriate dissemination channels for that to happen. Here are a few examples. So you might like to do what we call a blog shot, which identifies the findings of a Cochrane intervention review, assesses the conclusions, and then packages it in a way that's easy to understand and use to a whole range of audiences. The wonderful thing about a blog shot in this way is the fact that it can be used as a template for other languages. Blog shots are a shortened version of a blog, and we use many consumers, policymakers, patients, practitioners to help write our blogs with us. So they are formatted and presented in a way that is user-friendly. We use our websites, we use social media, we use multimedia. We have podcasts, we have videos, and we are able to showcase authors. We are able to showcase practitioners and patients and policymakers in how they consume that information. And we also work a lot with the media. The media are, the global media present us with a platform in order to disseminate the findings of our reviews. And with high impactful, high priority reviews, we do lean on global and national media in order to disseminate the findings. And this has shown us that this can be a springboard to other dissemination. So the aim of this theme is to ensure that our users receive and can act on our reviews and dissemination products. We work with translation teams, many of them are volunteers, in nearly 16 languages. And one of our key dissemination products, and a real priority for us in the next 12 months, is the standardized approach and a new way of addressing our plain language summaries. At the moment, over 25,000 of them are translated from English, and we know that from our visits to our main organisational website, Cochrane.org, we know that 80% of visitors are coming to read those plain language summaries. It is our biggest dissemination product, and it is translated in a number of languages. Again, in terms of our working groups and how we implement these changes, and we share our knowledge, we build resources, we support this theme by having a working group that works across the organisation. And this working group is expert in dissemination. They are dissemination champions, and they support and train and coach people within Cochrane contributors within groups and geographic regions to get the best and the most out of their dissemination products. One of the key activities this year, and is very new to Cochrane, is the launch, the very recent launch of what is termed as our dissemination checklist and guidance. And you can see this checklist on the right hand side. Apologies that it is in small print, but you'll be able to see this in more detail when this slide deck is shared with you following this webinar. So essentially, what is this? This is a huge piece of work for Cochrane this year, and has been a commissioned piece of work where we've been working with the team in Cochrane, Norway, to produce a standardized checklist and guidance. The checklist is just one part of it. The guidance is how it is applied in practice, to how we may offer a standardized approach to improve the quality of our dissemination products. So, for example, this looks at 18 steps. Not all have to be done, but gives a guidance to how you may improve the quality of dissemination products. So it asks you questions around, have you really considered your target audience? Have you reused plain language? Have you made sure that how you communicate the findings of your review is relevant to them? Have you made sure that the evidence involves real people? Have you made it clear that this is from a systematic review? Have you used correct labeling and numbers? It talks about how you would describe the certainty of the evidence and how you may have presented the findings in more than one way. So it's an 18-step guidance which will help people improve the quality of their dissemination products. Now, we have just launched this in the last few weeks, and we are now embarking on a 12-month implementation plan of how we can get this into practice and policy across the organisation. So that will involve a number of training workshops. In fact, only a few hours ago, I was working with the first tranche of 30 people that we're bringing together in January to train them on how to use this checklist, how to really put this into practice across our organisation. And those 30 people then will have the ability and the skill set to be able to go on and train in their relevant regions with their relevant languages and build a community of practice of dissemination champions. We are also looking at visual dissemination products such as infographics that we can improve the consistency approach, and again working with external expertise in helping us use the checklist, apply the checklist to infographics. And we are looking at a consistent, a standardized approach to plain language summaries and how this is linked to the implementation of our multilingual strategy in the next 1 to 3 years. I want to just briefly mention that we also use a lot of this work through our 24-hour, 7-day-a-week press office, which is manned by the knowledge translation team, and we are there as a service to provide additional support and resource to Cochrane regional settings, groups, as well as our review groups, and we field media inquiries across the organisation. There's just a few details there of some of the press activity and the media coverage that we've received in the last 12 months or so. So you'll see that there are a number of public health reviews there that do gain a lot of attention and media attention. Nutritional labelling on menus in cafes and restaurants, the HPV vaccine protects against cervical lesions in young women. We saw a big review on the effect of omega-3 supplements on the risk of experiencing heart disease, stroke and death. and particularly the intake of omega-3 during pregnancy, reducing the risk of facilitating pull is how KT implementation is supporting this theme. So again, another working group from across Cochrane that focuses on growing capacity in our users. So we are and have been working with policymakers in 2 training sessions this year to invite policymakers to come and talk and share their work of how they are using Cochrane reviews and how we can better support them in the use of synthesized evidence. We also saw a new platform of the Cochrane Library published last year in both English and Spanish, and improvements to that platform is one of the biggest examples of facilitating pull in KT, because it's ensuring that we have user-friendly functionality, improved functionality, in order to drive more people to the Cochrane Library and use and obtain our evidence. And we're also developing online modules and training specific to target audience requirements. The theme of exchange, as I alluded to at the beginning, really does look at how we are focusing on strategic partnerships. We have a number of global partnerships with the WHO, with Wikipedia, with GIN, the Guidelines International Network, and we are working with other partner organisations on the support and uptake of evidence. We also, as many of you may have been aware, we also are working every 4 years on a Global Evidence Summit, which brings together partner organisations. The inaugural one was in Cape Town in 2017, and our next one will be in Prague in 2021. So all of these, plus our work with external stakeholders, looks at and embeds a programme of work across the organisation to support people working with our users in relationships to support the use and advocate for the use of synthesized evidence. Again, these are some of the areas within the Improving Climate and Building Demand that we have been working on. So advocating for evidence-informed health decision-making. We have reward prizes that recognises initiatives that have the potential to reduce research waste, public statements to the FDA on the proposal for clinical study reports, and we have a number of recommended dose podcasts, as they're called, which looks at how we can share that evidence and disseminate that evidence, advocating for synthesized evidence across a range of platforms. We're also supporting the advocacy theme with a new advocacy strategy. So again, advocating for the use of high quality evidence into health decision making. One of the key areas of that strategy is to really promote transparency and integrity in research. Cochrane recently supported an all trials report updating the UK House of Commons Science and Technology Select Committee on rates of clinical trial reporting amongst universities and hospital trusts, known as NHS in the UK. And there's a number of news items that you can go to that shows how we are supporting that all trials work. Building an effective infrastructure for knowledge translation across the organisation has really been a key task, and by no means an easy challenge. It is really quite important that we get this right internally. We are a vast, complex, diverse organisation. We work in a number of languages, and we also work with a number of contributors whose day job, day-to-day activities may not always be related to Cochrane. They wear a number of hats. They have a number of expertise, but they are brought together in a collaborative spirit. So building the sustainable infrastructure, providing the right resource, providing the right training, using the expertise of our working groups, many of whom are volunteers, has been really fantastic learning for us in Cochrane. But we do know that this doesn't happen overnight. This is done with a lot of collaboration, the true spirit of what this organisation is about. And we know that by involving not just internal contributors, but also external stakeholders, whether they are policymakers, whether they are people that are well versed in KT, whether they are consumers, whether they are researchers or clinicians, has been a huge value to the development of building an internal structure for Cochrane to follow. And a lot of that is still ongoing. There are pockets where it's happening very well and consistently, but we've also learnt that KT and the integration of KT has to live and work alongside our number one priority, which is producing credible and up-to-date evidence. And however accessible that knowledge translation work can be, it has to be linked with the review production cycle and the goal one of producing timely, high quality systematic evidence. So they do go hand in hand, and in order for that to happen, Katie and the team are providing learning resources, ongoing learning resources, capturing and sharing case studies and examples. And a lot of this work, while we are such a diverse and global organisation, is done through a webinar programme that we have been leading and facilitating during 2019 and will continue for the next 12 months in 2020. We rarely come together as a complete organisation. Sometimes we do that twice a year with our governance meetings and our colloquia, but clearly this isn't, from an environmental view, not sustainable, but also is quite rare. So what we want to do is make sure that we have continuous learning, and in order to do that, we are looking at other digital platforms in order to share our learning, and one of those is a KT webinar programme. In the last 12 months and for next year, we are planning at least one a month, and that looks across those 6 themes, how we can really build our work, how we can provide training and learning resources centred at both an internal capacity building, but also appealing to the needs of end users. So we support the knowledge translation efforts through annual colloquia. That's our annual flagship scientific conference that happens every 12 months. We are looking at Toronto next year for 2020 and their theme of rapid learning health systems. And then we also look to October 2021 and the second Global Evidence Summit, which, as I say, is a partner organisation led by Cochrane, but together with JBI, GIN, Campbell Collaboration 2, all joining us for a programme of scientific discussion and debate that looks at the use and supporting evidence to, using evidence to improve lives. And a lot of that is not just, is multi-sectoral as well. So it's not just healthcare, we're looking at education, equity, environment, and I'm delighted to say that the Global Organising Committee agreed that Prague would be their next destination, a collaboration between Cochrane Czech Republic and also the JBI Centre of Excellence there. And they would be the hosts of the second Global Evidence Summit in 2 years' time. And we are currently working on a programme where knowledge translation will be an overarching theme across that scientific programme. As an organisation and a Cochrane first, we have introduced a mentoring programme this year. At the moment, in its first cohort, which started only a few months ago, involves 12 pairs, so 12 mentors and 12 mentees matched together based on lots of different factors, but including language, region, the outputs of their work plans, all working on a project within Cochrane that involves knowledge translation. And you would take a mentor who is expert and well-versed and has a wealth of experience in a particular area and match them with a mentee working on a specific project. And their role is to work together for 6 months, remotely, face-to-face, through digital communications, for that mentor to really help that mentee deliver that program of work. We are 3 months into this program. It started.
Okay.
Apologies. We are 3 months into that program, and those 12 pairs are working well together. Of mentorship. And another key area for us is the evaluation and monitoring across health domains and our 4 KT audiences. We have yet to establish a formal way of evaluating and monitoring our KT activities other than qualitative surveys, focus groups, and anecdotal information. We know what we have done, but we are still yet to evaluate our KT activities in a formal way. And that we are beginning a process now involving external organisations to help us formally evaluate and put together what we call theory of change frameworks for each of the 4 target audiences. So I wanted to just share with you what our training website looks like, where our online resources are. As I said at the beginning, our role is to coordinate, support and pull together the work of all the working groups across the organisation, made up of people from around Cochrane with expertise in many different areas. We want to introduce KT in Cochrane. We want to tell people what it is and how it applies to their work. We've included videos, examples of KT best practice around our community. Part of this is standardising plain language terminology, demystifying the jargon that's around knowledge translation. So we've developed a glossary. We want to be able to share our evidence in a way that's consumable and fit for purpose and meets the end user needs. And as I said, we wanted to be sure that we are providing the best possible raw resources to build capacity within our diverse organisations. So we really have to be sure that we are providing tools to help Cochrane groups communicate, disseminate the findings of their reviews to different audiences. And we want to be able to improve the uptake of Cochrane evidence with those end users. And doing all this in a way that is accessible and is can be translated into many different languages. We also want to be sure that Cochrane reviews answer the right questions. So the guidance document produced that I showed you earlier helps support our Cochrane groups prioritise these topics. And that's supported through a series of workshops and ongoing webinars. And we continue to support the embedding of priority setting across our review groups. Improving the uptake of Cochrane evidence is really important so that users can understand and act on Cochrane evidence. We have, as part of this collection in front of you, You can see we have case studies from across the organisation and more to come. And we are making sure that everything that we do is available in the languages that Cochrane produces. And you can see that all our training resources, including the new dissemination checklist and guidance, is available on our training website at that URL address. So that really brings me to the end of my presentation, and I would like to open the floor for questions. I hope that I've given you some sort of insight into how Cochrane is addressing and making sure that our knowledge translation is working in action. In summary, we see knowledge translation in Cochrane is about supporting the use of health evidence by health decision makers. And quite frankly, this is the reason why we exist. We say that Cochrane exists so that healthcare decisions can get better. And that's what we're trying to do with our efforts. We should be aiming to keep the needs of our end users at the heart of all we do. Listen to your audience, listen to your audience, listen to your audience, and when you're sick of listening to your audience, go back and listen to some more. And that we are responsible for and we commit to a structured program building on the collaboration of this diverse organisation to really foster the growth and integration of KT across our global community. We need to make sure that our evidence is relevant, that we produce the right reviews that are most needed and delivered in a timely way. We need to make sure that our evidence is accessible, produced in formats and languages that are understood and are used, and that we work with audiences to facilitate the use of this synthesized evidence. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to take any questions from you.
Thank you so much, Jo, for that really very comprehensive presentation on Cochrane's KT strategy and framework. So please remember, if you want to ask a question, you can either unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can put it in the chat box, and I will read it out for Jo. Maybe you can ask a question, Jo, is how can the different members in Cochrane, are they able to provide, can they contribute in a way to the KT framework? How can they participate in this process?
Sorry, who specifically?
Oh, so that in general, if a Cochrane member would like to get involved with KT more, is there an opportunity for that?
Yes, of course. So the best way of doing that would be to get in touch with myself or a member of the team. There are lots of ways that we are open to people being involved in knowledge translation, depending, I mean, I guess we map it to the themes, we map it to people's interest, we map it to people's expertise. We do have a number of working groups, as I said, across the themes. So we are always looking at renewing our membership of those working groups. We also have an advisory group, which I co-lead with members of the community, and those advisors, again, we're renewing the membership of that group, and I'm always interested in being approached by and challenged by new thinking in knowledge translation across the world, but particularly from people who represent their work and associations with the target audiences. We know that we've got new people joining the advisory group in 2020 that really come from a strong clinician background, which I think is an area that we would love to see, more engagement in with Cochrane. We have been working with policymakers. We have been delivering a program of work with people who just want to translate Cochrane evidence and plain language summaries into and disseminate them. A lot of people have been part of what we call an extended network of social media VIPs, where they may not want to directly work with knowledge translation, but they want to help disseminate the findings of the reviews. So we use their social media platforms to support their work, and that's what takes us beyond just our audiences into the wider world. So there are lots of ways that you can take part and show interest, again based on your availability and your areas of passion and expertise, and we'd really welcome that.
Great, thanks. There's a question from Donald. He's asking, can you provide some examples of formats used to disseminate evidence to policymakers?
Yes, of course. So we have been working on two things. One is a policy brief, and the other one is a review summary brief, and they are quite different because they look at the needs of each of the policymakers. And what we understand and what we've been learning about is really how the policy at country level. So a lot of our work is being led by our centres, our geographic groups at a country level, and based on the relationship and the dialogue, deliberative dialogues that they've been having with policymakers, how that's used. So some of our groups have what's called an evidence brief, where they might take the one systematic review and provide evidence in an evidence brief, but a policy brief might be something that is a suite of reviews or on a particular health topic area, and they would synthesize the findings of those reviews and provide a policy brief which looks across the particular health topic. There isn't a standardized approach for that. We haven't yet determined whether that would be the right resource for our organisation. We are taking the learning from what's happening at country level and what's particularly nuanced and tailored for policymakers at a national level. Okay. But I would be very open to a template that does.
Great, thanks. Then there are two questions linked to the mentorship. One is from Margaret, and she's asking how can one participate in the mentorship, and the other one is from Teresa, who's asking if there are any early results of the mentoring program and whether the program was internally or externally funded.
Okay, if I deal with the second one first. So in terms of this is a Cochrane first, and we're very proud that this has been in knowledge translation. The senior management team and the governing board are watching this very carefully. We hope that if we are successful, and not in a critical way, I should say, more in the way that what might be the learning for this for greater upscale. Coaching and mentorship is one of my particular passions, and it's been very close to my heart for a long time, both working in media, in journalism, and in professional and corporate communications. And this is centrally funded. We have investments to carry out knowledge translation implementation each year. And actually, this is a relatively very small cost. This is people's time and also providing them the mobility, whether it's a platform, a digital platform, but actually, the best cost, the true cost of this is people's time and passion. Bringing together a set of mentors, matching them with mentees, but yes, it's very much done internally and supported internally, and the early indications are showing that the hardest challenge was matching the right mentee with the right mentor. Okay, so and as you would expect, our early we found that we had a lot more mentees wanting to be part of the program than we had mentors. So we did use mentors both inside and outside the organisation, and they were, depending on their field of expertise, they have been matched with the right Cochrane project, okay, because the mentees had to show that they were working on a specific Cochrane piece of work with a definable objective and an outcome. And there were some mentees that just didn't make it because they weren't, the project wasn't developed enough and didn't have clear measurable outcomes, and there were mentors that we just couldn't find that would work with mentees for whatever reason. So the matching program was probably the most challenging, but in quite an inspirational way, really, because you know the 12 pairs that we've got have really got some strong alignment. So we hope it works. They've started to meet. They've each had at least one session together, and they are being closely monitored in the sense of not monitored, they're being coached by myself and other members of the team, and we are using other advisors as consultants and support during this process. We don't have any early indications yet. It's been too short time. We didn't want to also publicly announce who they were. We wanted to give them a level of confidentiality. We wanted to give them a chance to get to know each other. We know that some mentees and mentors, some pairs are meeting quite systematically, have diarised their meetings, and it's at least twice a month. Others might be once a month and once every 6 weeks. So there's no prescriptive expectation, but after 3 months, we are going to work with an external evaluation organisation that's going to do some informal based interviews with both the mentee and the mentor along the lines of how's it going, what's working well for you, what's not working well for you, how could we support you more, what do you need. So it's really a temperature check-in with them, and that will be happening in the next month to 6 weeks, and then we will see how that's coming through. The other thing I would say is that all the mentees have a good working relationship with the knowledge translation team, and I would like to think that if there were any flags or concerns, that they would raise those with us. So we know who these people are, we work with them, and we hope that early indications will give us an idea of how this is progressing in the next month or so, and then we will have more of a formal evaluation at the end of March 2020. We will then synthesize those results, speak to both mentors and mentees, and then open up a cohort based on that learning for the second part of 2020. So to the other question, if you'd like to be a part of that, then by all means drop me an email or my colleague Karen Head, and we can work with you. You know, are you looking to be a mentor? Are you looking to be a mentee? And if you are a mentee, what specifically is your Cochrane project that you'd like to achieve?
Great, thanks. Then I have a question from Yiti, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, who's asking about how the prioritization process is carried out and how long does it take on average?
Yeah, great question. Gosh, well, I don't think there's any answer to how long it takes, and it depends who you are. I guess geographic groups take part in their own priority setting exercises, and we can give you some idea of what that looks like. I mean, you might be able to talk to Solange and Charles and Tamara about how they do it in South Africa, and they could give you a view to that. My work has been working closely with the Cochrane review groups in terms of making sure they have a plan for the next 12 months. So it's a priority setting exercise across 12 months in partnership with their funders, in partnership with the whole of the editorial base within the review group to make sure that they are answering the right questions, that the guidance document supports them helping to prioritise those topics and questions. And as we did with the tobacco addiction group, as we have done with pregnancy and childbirth, it's really answering those questions that the funders want to see answered, and then they form what's called an organisational priority setting list, and then the ones that are the most impactful are likely to be more high profile, are likely to need full dissemination plans attached to them, are likely to have to engage with other external stakeholders. Plans are then attached to each of those priority reviews. So the priority list may be fewer, it's not a long list, we may be producing fewer reviews, but the aim is that we are answering the right questions, and each of those reviews during the editorial process, way before publication, we are engaged with the necessary stakeholders, and there is a full dissemination plan attached to every review.
Thanks, Joe. I think we have time for just one last question, which is a follow-up question from Donald about dissemination information to the policymakers. And he's asking whether or how do you measure how policymakers are using the provided evidence, and whether you measure the impact of the use of the evidence.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I wish I had an answer. Well, certainly I wish I could give you a more formal answer to that question, Donald. I think it's excellent. That's exactly what we need to do. So there's about there are three priority projects for us in the next 12 months. One is a standardised approach to plain language summaries. Two is dissemination and the checklist and guidance. And three is our monitoring and evaluation work. So we have been seeking and asking for a commission piece of work to help us formally monitor and evaluate KT work across the 4 audiences and policymakers, and the use of that evidence and how they use that evidence. We need to have some formal metrics. There's no question about that. And that has been an area that we haven't got to yet. There's pockets of it, and we can learn from what colleagues are doing across the organisation, but we don't have a formal evaluation framework, and we need to have that. So at the moment we are planning to work with an organisation who will help us develop and build those frameworks of formal evaluation. And we would be looking to work with someone, a partner that has at least expertise in one of the target audiences, and policymakers, you know, are one of them, no question. So we would like to identify what they need from us in a formal way and how we can build frameworks. But as yet, I can't answer that question formally. We only know anecdotal information from what we hear at country level and from colleagues, but I hope in 12 months' time I'll be able to give you a more robust and evidence-based answer.
Thank you so much. I think it is indeed an important question that all of us are grappling with and trying to figure out how we can assess our impact. Thank you so much for your time, Joe, for this insightful presentation. It was very useful, very comprehensive. I'm sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions. We'll be sharing the link to the webinar recording as well as a copy of the slide of the presentation. Thank you everyone for joining, for your questions and your participation. And thank you, Joe, once again.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.